The morning sun poured into the kitchen, casting long shadows across the oak dining table. Ethan's coffee mug sat half empty, the steam long gone. He stared at the crisp white paper in front of him, its words blurring together no matter how hard he tried to make sense of them. It was a petition for divorce. No argument, no warning, no explanation, just a signature line marked in blue ink and a date stamped in the corner. Ethan ran a hand through his dark hair, his mind racing to grasp how they had reached this point. He had kissed Grace goodbye just yesterday morning, before leaving for work, the same way he had for the past 7 years. She had smiled at him, a small, distracted smile, but there had been nothing unusual about it. No argument, no tension. Nothing that could have prepared him for this. "Grace," he murmured to the empty room, his voice cracking under the weight of her absence. The house felt different without her. Too quiet, too still. Ethan glanced toward the living room, where the cushions on the couch were slightly askew, a book lying open on the coffee table. The scene was deceptively normal, as though she might walk back in at any moment, holding grocery bags or laughing about something she'd heard on the radio. But she was gone. Ethan's gaze fell back to the document. His name was typed neatly at the top, alongside hers. Ethan Michaels and Grace Michaels. He traced the letters of her name with his finger, as if doing so might summon her back. He hadn't called her yet. He didn't know what to say. Part of him was terrified to hear her voice, afraid that she might tell him something he didn't want to hear, that it wasn't a mistake, that she really wanted this. The doorbell rang, startling him out of his thoughts. Ethan pushed back his chair and walked to the door, his bare feet padding against the hardwood floor. When he opened it, he found his sister Lauren, standing there with a concerned look on her face. "I got your message," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "What's going on?" Ethan gestured vaguely toward the kitchen. "She left." Lauren frowned. "What do you mean she left?" "I mean she left," Ethan repeated, his voice rising slightly. "She's gone. She left me divorce papers." No explanation. Nothing. Lauren followed him into the kitchen, her heels clicking against the floor. She picked up the document, skimming it quickly. She didn't say anything at all. Not even why. "No," Ethan said, sinking back into his chair. "She didn't even leave a note. Just this." He gestured toward the paper, like it was a foreign object, something he didn't want to touch. Lauren set the papers down carefully, then crossed her arms. "This doesn't make sense. Grace isn't impulsive. She doesn't just do things like this." Ethan rubbed his temples. "You think I don't know that? I've been sitting here all morning trying to figure out what I missed, but nothing makes sense. We weren't fighting. We weren't unhappy. At least, I didn't think we were." Lauren gave him a sympathetic look, but said nothing. The truth was, Ethan couldn't remember the last time he and Grace had talked about anything meaningful. Their lives had fallen into a routine. Wake up, go to work, come home, eat dinner, watch TV, go to bed. They shared space, but not much else. He had always thought that was normal, that it was just part of being married. But now, sitting here alone, he wondered if he had been wrong. "I'm going to call her," Lauren said suddenly, reaching for her phone. "No," Ethan said quickly, his hand shooting out to stop her. "Don't." "Why not? Don't you want answers?" "Of course I do," Ethan said, his voice tight. "But I don't know if I'm ready to hear them." Lauren sighed but put her phone away. "Okay, but you can't just sit here and do nothing. You need to talk to her, Ethan. You need to figure out what's going on." Ethan nodded, but his stomach churned at the thought. What if the answer was something he couldn't handle? As Lauren left, promising to check on him later, Ethan found himself alone once more. The house was quiet again, and the divorce papers sat on the table like a ticking time bomb. He didn't know where Grace was or why she had done this, but one thing was certain: his life would never be the same. Ethan sat in the silence, the weight of Grace's absence pressing against his chest. Every corner of the house whispered her presence, teasing him with memories. The faint scent of her vanilla perfume still lingered in the air, as if mocking him for not noticing how fleeting it had become. He rose from his chair, pacing the length of the kitchen, his thoughts unraveling. He opened the refrigerator, hoping for some distraction, but the sight of her favorite almond milk on the shelf made his throat tighten. He slammed the door shut, leaning against it for support. The dining table came back into view, and with it, the divorce papers. A sharp pang of anger shot through him. What gave her the right to leave like this? So abruptly, so coldly. Their vows hadn't meant anything to her, apparently. But almost as quickly as the anger flared, it dissipated into confusion. This wasn't the Grace he knew. She was thoughtful, deliberate. The kind of person who would spend weeks debating which restaurant to book for a special occasion, just to make sure it felt right. Filing for divorce without a word, that wasn't her. Ethan's thoughts swirled back to the last few months. Had there been signs? He thought about the evenings when she seemed distracted, scrolling endlessly on her phone while he worked late in the study, or the mornings when she would leave earlier than usual, claiming she needed some time to herself. He had chalked it up to stress, thinking it was her way of finding balance. But now, maybe he had missed something deeper. The door to their bedroom was slightly ajar, and Ethan hesitated before stepping inside. Her side of the closet was half empty, the hangers swaying slightly as if they'd been disturbed recently. She had left behind her winter coat and a few dresses, items too heavy for her to carry in a rush. The sight sent a chill through him. This wasn't just a temporary escape. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the photo on the nightstand. It was from their honeymoon in Italy, the two of them smiling against the backdrop of the Amalfi Coast. He picked up the frame, his thumb brushing against the glass. "Where are you, Grace?" he whispered. His phone buzzed on the dresser, jolting him from his thoughts. He reached for it, half hoping it would be her, but the screen displayed his best friend's name, Jake. Ethan sighed and answered. "Hey, man, Lauren called me," Jake said without preamble. "What the hell is going on?" "She said Grace left you." "Yeah," Ethan replied, his voice flat. "Did you guys fight or something?" Jake asked. "I mean, this is crazy. She wouldn't just leave for no reason, right?" "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "That's the thing. I don't know why she left. There was no fight, no warning. Just papers." Jake was silent for a moment. "That doesn't make sense. Grace loves you. Everyone can see that. Maybe she's just, I don't know, going through something. Then why wouldn't she tell me?" Ethan said, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "We're supposed to be a team. She's supposed to talk to me, not blindside me like this." Jake sighed. "Look, I don't have answers, but if anyone can figure this out, it's you. Just don't jump to conclusions, okay? Maybe there's more to this than it seems." After hanging up, Ethan lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Jake's words offered little comfort. The more he thought about it, the more questions piled up in his mind. Was there someone else? Had she fallen out of love with him? Or was there something going on in her life that she hadn't shared? As the day stretched into evening, Ethan found himself replaying their last conversation in his head. It had been over breakfast, just the day before. She had been unusually quiet, but when he asked if something was wrong, she had shaken her head and smiled. "I'm fine," she had said, her voice soft. "Just thinking about some things." He hadn't pressed her, assuming she would open up when she was ready. Now, he wished he had. The hours passed, but Ethan couldn't sleep. Instead, he sat at the dining table with a notebook, jotting down everything he could remember about the past few months. He listed every interaction, every moment that seemed even slightly out of the ordinary. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't piece together the puzzle. And then, as the clock struck midnight, an idea struck him. Grace had always kept a journal, an old leather-bound notebook she carried with her everywhere. She said it was her way of organizing her thoughts, of making sense of the chaos in her mind. If she had left him without a word, Maybe her journal held the answers he needed. Ethan stood abruptly, heading toward her desk in the corner of the living room. His heart pounded as he pulled open the drawer. Ethan stared at the empty drawer, his pulse racing. Her journal was gone, just like her. He slammed the drawer shut and leaned against the desk, his mind spinning. That journal had been her lifeline, the one place where she poured out everything she couldn't say aloud. If it wasn't here, then maybe she had taken it with her intentionally. Or maybe she didn't want him to find it. The thought sent a chill through him. Was there something she was hiding? A secret so big that she felt the need to run away instead of confronting him? Unable to sit with his thoughts, Ethan grabbed his keys and headed out into the night. The air was crisp, the streets quiet as he drove aimlessly, hoping for some clarity. His mind replayed every moment from the past year. The late nights at work, the weekends they spent apart because he was too busy or too tired to do anything meaningful together. Had he neglected her? Had she felt invisible? As he drove past their favorite cafe, a pang of nostalgia hit him. This was where they had shared their first date. Sitting in a corner booth, laughing over shared stories and burnt coffee. He parked the car and stepped inside, the familiar scent of roasted beans and cinnamon wrapping around him like a memory. The barista recognized him immediately. "Hey, Ethan. Haven't seen you and Grace in a while." Ethan forced a smile. "Yeah, it's been busy." The barista nodded. "She was here a few days ago. Looked like she was writing something. Left in kind of a hurry, though." Ethan froze. "She was here." "Yeah." Seemed a little stressed. "I think she left her notebook. We put it in the lost and found." Ethan's heart leapt. "Do you still have it?" The barista disappeared into the back and returned with a familiar leather-bound journal. Ethan's hands trembled as he took it, murmuring his thanks. Back in his car, he hesitated before opening it. It felt wrong, invasive, but hadn't she already invaded his life by leaving without a word? Flipping it open, he found pages of her neat handwriting. The entries were raw, emotional, and painful to read. "It's been months, and I don't know how to tell Ethan what I'm feeling. Every time I try, the words get stuck in my throat. He's a good man, a kind man, but I feel like I'm disappearing in this marriage. I've tried to be everything he needs, his support system, his cheerleader, but somewhere along the way, I forgot how to be myself. I don't blame him entirely. This is my fault, too. I've spent so much time bending myself to fit into his life that I've lost sight of who I am. And then there's the guilt. He works so hard, and I know he's doing it for us. But when was the last time we actually sat down and talked about what we wanted? About what I wanted? I don't even know how to answer that question anymore. I've thought about leaving before, but I always stop myself. What kind of person does that make me? Am I selfish for wanting more? Maybe I am, but I can't stay in a marriage where I feel invisible. It's killing me." Ethan closed the journal, his chest tightening. The entries continued, detailing her growing unhappiness, her feelings of isolation, and her fear of hurting him. She hadn't left because she didn't love him. She had left because she didn't know how to stay. Ethan found Grace a week later, staying in a small rental cabin on the outskirts of the city. She opened the door cautiously, her expression a mixture of surprise and apprehension. "Ethan," she said softly. "Grace," he replied, holding up the journal. "I found this." Her shoulders sagged, and she stepped aside to let him in. The cabin was simple, almost bare, with only the essentials. It reminded him of her, uncomplicated, yet full of depth. "I read it," he admitted, placing the journal on the small coffee table. Grace sat down, avoiding his gaze. "Then you know—" "I know you've been hurting," Ethan said, his voice trembling. "And I didn't see it. I didn't even think to ask. I thought we were okay. I wanted us to be," Grace whispered. "But somewhere along the way, I lost myself. And I didn't know how to tell you without hurting you." Ethan sat beside her, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "I wish you had told me. I would have done anything to fix this. To fix us." Grace looked at him, tears brimming in her eyes. I know, but that's the problem, Ethan. I didn't want you to fix me. I wanted to feel whole on my own, and I couldn't do that while I was trying to be everything you needed. They sat in silence for a long time, the weight of their unspoken words settling between them. Finally, Ethan spoke. Do you still love me? Grace's breath hitched. Yes, but love isn't enough if I don't love myself. Ethan nodded, his heart breaking. He wanted to fight for her, to convince her to come back. But deep down, he knew she was right. She needed time to find herself, to heal. I won't stop loving you, he said quietly. Grace reached for his hand, her touch warm and familiar. And I won't stop loving you. But sometimes, the kindest thing we can do for the people we love is to let them go. Months later, Ethan received a postcard in the mail. It was from Grace, sent from a small town on the coast where she had started a new life. Thank you for understanding, Ethan. I hope you're finding your own happiness, just like I am. Love always, Grace. Ethan smiled sadly, tucking the postcard into the journal. Her silent goodbye had shattered him, but it had also forced him to grow. And for that, he would always be grateful.